Vina Honorable Tendai Biti.
Good afternoon, compatriots. Good afternoon, fellow defenders. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very proud of the team we have here, our chair lady, Blessed, our spokes, Rutendo, Rulimbo, the entire leadership of the Federation. So I want to salute you. This meeting was called at very short notice. But you've got the numbers here. And for me, it's a miracle that the CDF was only launched after very difficult circumstances on the 5th of March 2026. But here we are building an organization, an important organization. Protecting the Constitution is so important. And this is one of the reasons why we've made it clear that this organization is not a political party and will not be a political party. It is going to oversee and protect the Constitution 200 years from now. We have seen constitutions under threat, even in the United States of America. Someone may want to go for a third term. Yet the American Constitution was made in 1774. So it is important to protect the Constitution. So it's very humbling to be here amongst fellow citizens in the diaspora. Our diaspora is very important as Zimbabwe. I consider that at one stage, in some stage, we will reap a diaspora dividend. Because you are here exposed to first world standards. Many of you are going to universities, acquiring knowledge, and one day that knowledge will benefit a democratic, free Zimbabwe. There are over 6 million, 7 million Zimbabweans outside Zimbabwe. And many of them have left involuntarily, either through political persecution, through economic difficulties, through domestic challenges, through conflict, through attrition. Half the voting population of Zimbabwe is actually now outside Zimbabwe. And 74% of our professionals, our top scientists, our top engineers, our top doctors, they are now in the diaspora. So we've been suffering and hemorrhaging a brain drain in the diaspora. Yet, as Obey has said, you are now making a fundamental contribution to the country's resources. Diaspora remittances are now US $3 billion a year. And that's much more than a foreign direct investment, which is less than $800 million a year. That is now much more than foreign aid, which with the collapse of the US aid is now less than US $500 million dollars a year. So if the diaspora were to close taps, Zimbabwe would suffer. People would die. The many people that you sent money at home. And because of this position, you must demand a voice. You must demand a stake because you are making a contribution. In the Middle Ages, when the Magna Carta was written in this country, in this very country, People used to say, no taxation without representation. People were paying tax, but parliament did not exist. So people demanded, people like William Pitt, people demanded that surely if we're going to pay tax, we must also be represented. And in the context of the diaspora, it is ironic that you are now become the most important source of foreign currency remittances, but you don't have a right to vote. In section 68 of the Zimbabwean Constitution is very clear. It says that every citizen, it doesn't say every citizen located in Zimbabwe, it says every citizen has a right to vote, and surely must be given the right to vote. But not only that, you must be given a voice because you are making an important fiscal contribution. We are gathered here to discuss the Constitution. The Zimbabwean Constitution, as all of you know, and many of you, I know, you participated in that referendum that was held in March of 2013. Many of you campaigned for a no vote in that referendum that was held in March of 2013. I also know that many of you here also participated in the referendum that was held on the 10th and 11th of February 2000 and rejected the constitution that was an outcome of the Constitutional Commission chaired by the late Chief Justice Godfrey Chitausi. So the battle and quest for a new constitution has been a constant struggle for Zimbabweans. In 1980, when we voted, we were voting to usher in a new constitution. The 1980 constitution ushered in one new democratic right, the concept of one man, one vote, one woman, one vote. The 1980 constitution ushered in another concept, a concept of equality, because before then, hitherto, black and white were not equal. Blacks were not allowed to occupy certain places, to go to certain schools, to own property. Blacks were not allowed to own property. Blacks were not allowed to own property in the rural areas. Even up to now, 48 years after independence, a black man can't have a title deed over his rural home in Utito or Chendambuya or Ngai or Cholojo. These are things that we fought for. And so in 1980, the fight was about a new constitution. So it's said that in 2026, we're still talking about a constitution. We're still talking about the constitution as unfinished business. But this time in a very regrettable manner, because they are now reversing the gains of 2013. But not only that, they are also reversing the gains of 1980. What was the biggest victory of 1980? The biggest victory of 1980 was one man, one vote. Was one woman, one vote. The ability of every Zimbabwean above the age of majority, above the age of 18, to choose freely a leader of his or her own choice. And so since 1980, we have been voting. The election of 1980 took place in February of 1980. And Prime Minister Robert Mugabe and his ruling ZANU-PF party were elected. We had another election in 1985. We had another election in 1990. We had another election in 1995, and the presidential election in 1996. We had an election in 2000. And 2000, as all of you know, was very significant. It was the first election that the MDC participated. It was held on the 26th of June 2000. The MDC won 58 seats out of 120. With the presidential election, which Morgan Richard Changirai won, that was held on the 10th and 11th of March 2001. With another election in 2008. With another election in 2030. With another election in 2018. With another election in 2023. And in all these elections, we were choosing a president. Or we were told we had chosen a president. Because the president we had chosen in 2018, in 2023, was not the president that was announced. But at least we were voting for a president. Now, come 16 February 2026, the government gazettes Constitutional Amendment Bill number 3 of 2026. And one of the first things it does is to say there will be no direct election of the president. Section 91 of the Constitution is being amended to remove the right of Zimbabweans to choose a president of their choice. And the president will now be elected by 280 members of parliament. And they've argued that, well, South Africa chooses its own president. The United Kingdom, it is parliament that chooses its own prime minister. The prime minister is not elected directly by direct vote. But these are false arguments. These are false arguments because our legacy, our fight, the fight we won in 1980 was the fight that we would choose a president of our choice. The use of South Africa as an example is wrong and dishonest. Because South Africa has got strong institutions. Dara Blessed was speaking about the judiciary. The judiciary is a strong institution in South Africa. It is independent. Only a few weeks ago, that Constitutional Court, in a very, very powerful judgment, set aside a decision by Parliament that said we could not impeach the president. Tell me, which judiciary in Africa do you think can make a decision that amounts to basically firing the president? So South Africa has got strong institutions. South Africa also has proportional representation. Proportional representation is a way of choosing people based purely on proportion. And it allows small parties to win and to have a voice. It allows minorities to win and to have a vote. So it is a totally different system. You know how gerrymandered constituencies are in Zimbabwe. The 2023 delimitation report was one of the worst delimitation reports ever. Harare, for instance, was supposed to get 34 seats by virtue of the population alone, but it ended up getting 29 seats. The same applies to urban areas like Mutare, urban areas like Gweru. They actually lost seats to rural areas. And now in this same bill, they are proposing to take away the power of delimitation from the Zimbabwe Election Commission to a committee, an executive committee, meaning that all urban areas will be slapped in rural or semi-rural areas, so that there will be very, very few urban seats to contest. We can't trust that. We can't trust that. We demand that we continue voting for our president. The other thing that we fought so dear, particularly in 2013, and this was one of the mischiefs that we sought to deal with in 2013. It was the mischief that power was not changing hands in Zimbabwe. We had a crisis of leadership. In 1980 to 2017, we had one leader. So in 2013, we said we want to guarantee that power moves from one individual to another individual. And to do that, we proposed term limit provisions. So in Section 91, Section 95, Section 96, Section 158 of the Constitution, we say the president shall have a term of office, and that his term of office his term limit is 5 years. And if we like you, Tukakufarira, Tropo sign, we give you another 5 years to make a total of 10 years. We did this in order to generate change, because change is the only ultimate constant. Many of you go to new jobs. Imagine what you do when you are in a new job. You work so hard. Imagine what happens when you have a new teacher, a new lecturer. There's extra energy, there's extra synergies. In this country that we are in, they change prime ministers like diapers. They are so used to changing prime ministers. That's their tradition. That is their. So while they might not have a constitutional term limit, they have a term limit in the form that they hold the prime minister to account, and at the slightest misdemeanor, the prime minister is gone. The last Tory government, I don't know how many prime ministers, one lasted 45 days. You know what I'm talking about, because you live here. So that is their tradition. Now in Africa, because we don't trust you, we put it in our document the constitution. Remember, the constitution is an agreement. So we said, you will do 5 years. If we like you, we give you another 5 years, then you go away. It is said, fellow defenders, that Zimbabwe since 1980 has only had 2 leaders. Only 2 leaders. If you go to Mozambique, which became independent 5 years before Zimbabwe was independent in 1975, they had Samora, Machel. They've had President Joaquim Chissano. They've had President Gebuza. They've had President Filipe Nyusi. Now they have President Chapo. We only have 2. If you go to Tanzania, Tanzania is in the newspapers right now for wrong reasons. They've had President Julius Nyerere, President Hassan Mwinyi, President Benjamin Mkapa, President Jaya Kikwete, the autocrat John Pombe Magufuli, now Mrs. Samia Suluhu. We just have 2. What's wrong with Zimbabwe? So that's why we put this in provision. That's why we put this provision. But we protected this provision. We said, if you want to remove term limits, you can remove them, but you need a referendum. This is spelled out in section 328 of the Constitution. But if you remove those term limits, they don't benefit you as an incumbent. But if you want to benefit, if you want the removal of the term limit to benefit you as an incumbent, you need another referendum, a second referendum. And these 2 referendums can be held simultaneously. They can be held on the same day, the 20th of May, 2028. They can be held. They will have to be held on 2 separate dates. And the reason why we did that was to make sure that no one would ever think about it. Because even ukatidhakisa ukatipa nyaope tumba mutoriro, you can't fool us into referendums. That was the idea of that. Now they bring in Constitutional Amendment number 2 and say, notwithstanding the provision of section 328, the president will be there until 2030. In fact, they actually don't say 2030. They just leave it blank, meaning that we could have a president for life. We could have a new Munumutapa. You know the Munumutapa Empire. The Munumutapa Empire was established 200 years after the birth of Christ. They built the great Zimbabwe. Munumutapa Chigwangu, Munumutapa Utamadzuka, Munumutapa Mavudzi. That empire collapsed in 1450. So someone now wants to take us back to 200 AD and establish a Munumutapa. And this is why we have some of these shenanigans. But one should ask, why are they doing this? What, for instance, is the interest of ZANU-PF in removing the electoral college from 17 million Zimbabweans to 280 people? Surely ZANU as an institution, it cannot be concerned about that. After all, by hook or crook, by force or otherwise, by theft or otherwise, they've been winning a presidential election. So why are they doing it? And the reason is very simple. Has now been captured by cartels, by syndicates, by Jigananda, who are not electable, not even in their own houses, with their own children, will they be elected? So because they are not electable, but because they've been going to State House so much, they are now so proximate to power, they now think, I can occupy that seat. But they are unelectable, so they must manipulate the electoral system in the electoral college to narrow it to 280 people. You can't buy 17 million people, but you can buy 280 people. You can commodify 280 people. And they've got money, they've been looting. They are sitting on the commanding heights of our economy. They control the fuel sector. They control the reserve bank and the huge amounts of foreign currency that are in the reserve bank. They control the gold sector. In 2025, last year, Zimbabwe delivered 47 tons of gold. Of those 47 tons, 30.9 tons was delivered by Scott Sakupkanya's Beta brands. The total income that we earned from gold last year was US $4.1 billion. So of that $40.1, Scott Sakupkanya got more than 2/3 of it. But you know that Scott Sakupkanya is just a nominal person. They control roads and road contracts. The Trababalas interchange should have cost $40 million. It was financed 3 times. The Bay Bridge rehabilitation was supposed to cost $40 million. It cost $200 million. Now they're building interchanges everywhere. There's one in Mapuku, now there's one in Masasa. I don't know why they don't build an interchange where I come from in Dotito in Chendabu. But we don't need interchanges, we need schools, we need roads, we need clinics, we need hospitals. They waited 2 weeks ago. I saw today that the king and his wife are attending a wedding somewhere. I can tell you $30 million will not be distributed today at the wedding that King Charles is attending. You saw them. How does a civil servant, a permanent secretary, donate 250,000 plus 250 pregnant cows at a wedding? How does that happen? In what part of the world? So when you and I struggle with 20 pounds, 100 pounds, 40 pounds, they deal with 300,000, 400,000. Motor vehicles that even in a first world country like this, I don't see. I've never seen a Rolls Royce car and I don't know what it looks like. But in Zimbabwe, it's dished out like confetti. My office, to go to my office in town, my office is in Milton Park, so I use North Avenue. So in North Avenue, there's a garage called Executive Motors owned by Victor. I've never seen such luxury. I've never seen such opulence. I've never seen such ostentatious consumerism. And this is Zimbabwe, where 79% of the people are living below the poverty datum line. This is Zimbabwe, where 96 out of 1,000 mothers are dying on giving birth. This is Zimbabwe, where 86 out of 1,000 infants are dying on childbirth. This is Zimbabwe, where people are surviving on sauna, 1 meal per day, kachivaro, kemafuta, netumashizha tutatu, twe rape or cabbage. You know it because you are paying black tax. Mafoni yenyu aya ukatona nhambe muZimbabwe unotoziva BP yako inotokwira. Ndataura na Blessed and Ru took me for dinner when I came. They were talking about how their blood pressure is up because of funds from us in Zimbabwe. And we are not appreciative. And about 200 pounds. And about 200 pounds. Could about 200 pounds. I'm for need 200 pounds. Can I ask any guy against it? To South and Valley, can I ask any guy against it? We're not grateful. That's what we do. You know it, you live with it. And my WhatsApp group now. I know fire. You know, you can't have fire.
It's true.
So our people are suffering. And you are carrying the burden of our people that are suffering. You've got multiple dependents. So, but in that sea of poverty, you have people that have contracts, the Geopomona contract. $7 million is being paid per month.
What?
Yes, the Geopomona contract. $7 million is being paid per month, $22,000 per day. So you have super first world corruption on the back of a little third world economy. And that is why we have CAB3. That is why it has nothing to do with everything that they are saying, it has everything to do with continuing to loot. A luta continua is the philosophy and state of gravity of CAB3. And there are other things that cannot be explained. Why, for instance, would they want to remove the gender commission? 56% of Zimbabweans are now women. And 2/3 of households in Zimbabwe are now run by women. Single mothers, divorced women, and widows like my own mother. They are running households. You know that. You are running households. So, but it's a patriarchal society. Our men are abusive. So we need the gender commission, but CAB3 in its wisdom, or lack of wisdom thereof, says we remove the gender commission. Another thing that we can't explain, they want to make traditional leaders remove their neutrality. At the present moment, traditional leaders are supposed to be neutral. They can't belong to any political party. And it's for obvious reasons, because Madzishe Anotonga Mosha, they preside over customary courts. They allocate land. So you need neutral people. They're saying, no, we want to make them political commissars of political parties. They want to remove a provision, Section 204, the Constitution. They want to remove that. But is that a way of coup-proofing? I don't know. But with or without a constitutional provision, the army will always defend the sovereign integrity of any country. That's why armies were created. They want to remove the process of public interviews of judges. You have seen some of those interviews. They help, because if you don't have public interviews, the danger that some people who can't even write their names can become judicial officers is clear. So public interviews are part of strengthening the judiciary that Dara Blessed was talking about. And we need a strong judiciary. We need a politicized judiciary. We don't need to live in a country where the judiciary has been weaponized, where remand is used to punish those with alternative opinions. Dara Blessed over there spent over a year in prison. Jenson Timber spent over a year in prison. Mazbabai Shanduko Godfrey Karaberera has just come out of prison, spent over 8 months in prison. Job Scala spent over 2 years in prison for nothing. For nothing. The list goes on and on. Right now, as I'm talking to you, Sitima, the former president of the Zimbabwe National Students Union, and Hama Uspa, the current president of the Zimbabwe National Students Union, are languishing in prison. For what? And so the style now is they arrest you, keep you inside, then you are acquitted, or they just withdraw charges. They arrest you, you are remanded, you stay inside for months and months and months and months and months. You are either acquitted or they let you go. But our prisons are not normal prisons. Our prisons have no right to be called prisons. In 2008, I was arrested. I stayed in Harare, Remand, Block C. We were so many of us. A room that was designed to take 35 people were over 400. Tairara floor up, sema bemba. Saka, you have to sleep same side. So you have a captain who now says, turn left, turn right. And in prison, Dara will tell you, you appreciate the value of a socks. Do you know a socks? You put on a socks. You appreciate the value of a socks because when you choose a socks every day, it's freedom. You choose socks, it will be freedom. So in prison, that's when you accept, you realize that simple things are freedom. That putting on a red dress today, not a yellow one, is freedom. Because in prison, you don't have it. And you appreciate the ordinary things like food. You appreciate that. You don't take those things for granted. And it is in jail that you understand the ultimate importance of freedom. And it makes you a better person. Mandela was made different by prison. The Mandela who went into prison and the Mandela who came out were two different persons. He understood the importance of inclusivity, of tolerance. He understood the importance of dialogue and talking to each other. Those of you who have read this autobiography, they know that there were some hardliners in the ANC who said, we're not going to talk to the white people. But Mandela knew that without dialogue, you can't build a nation. Without dialogue, you can't build a nation. So you build dialogue by talking to each other. Most importantly, you build a nation by listening to each other. We never listen to each other. We never listen to each other. And we build a nation by acknowledging where we are wrong. The word sorry is a very small word, but it's the heaviest word to come out of one's mouth. Many of you here can't say sorry to each other. You brutalize each other. So we built a nation by that. But I'm going to tell you another thing which builds a nation, which we, particularly Africans, don't know and don't respect. We built a nation through distrust, not through trust. The only institution which you build on trust is marriage. But that's why marriage fails. Because one person stands up and says, I do. Another one stands up and says, I do. The priest says you may kiss the bride. But 2 weeks later, you are breaching that contract. Because one of the fundamental conditions of that contract is that there is no more freedom of association. But mangwana chapato na maini Mildred. You understand? So it fails because it's built on trust. The reason why we have constitutions is that we don't trust power. So we make constitutions based on mistrust. That you may be the best amongst us. But if you do your 5 years, you must go. You understand? Yes. You do your 5 years and you must go. We build, constitutions are based on mistrust. Dara was talking about judges and people. We have to fundamentally distrust the human being so that we can create a society that then vaccinates against each individual's foibles or weaknesses. Even though the pastor, without a president, we don't want to be that. Say, you understand? So we put vaccines against the abuse. We put vaccines against people. You're not going to be an engineer, you're not going to be that. You're not going to be a professor, you're not going to be that. So we put mechanisms to prevent that. So in a constitution, we need to build a constitution based on mistrust. And in 2013, we did that. We said, we don't trust you, so you have your 5 years. We don't trust you. We are going to force you to choose a running mate that you want. Running mate, you remember that? So that ukafa or ukaenda, that person takes over from you. Because we don't trust you and we don't trust your political party. And that brings stability. If Donald Trump resigns or goes away, J.D. Vance will take over. And there's stability, there's predictability. So we are mistrusting you. We are mistrusting you that you might put your son to be the next president of Zimbabwe. But the country is not private property. You might put your wife to be the president. But the country is not private property. You might put your mistresses there as the next presidents, but the country is not private property. So the 2013 constitution is a decent constitution because it was built on mistrust. Most of us are Christians here. I don't know why dictators don't understand that the Bible itself is about change and continue it. You see Adam in the first few chapters of Genesis. You don't see Adam in the book of Revelations. In fact, in the book of Genesis, There are so many characters who just die and end in the book of Genesis. Jesus himself was here very briefly, 3 years, and he was gone. In fact, the New Testament is dominated more by Paul than by Jesus himself. There's continuity. But you don't find Paul in the book of Revelations. That's change. That's continuity. And with continuity comes improvement. With continuity comes new ideas. With continuity comes new freshness. And that is the challenge. That is the tragedy of Africa. That is the tragedy of Zimbabwe, where people think they are chained to the seat of power. Portugal. I once said in a public meeting in South Africa that why is it that we Africans are good at long distance running but not at relays? And the answer is very simple. We can't pass on the patterns. Kenya is a very great athletic country. Ethiopia is a great athletic country, but you have never seen a gold medal won by Kenya or Ethiopia or Morocco. We can't pass on the baton stick. And that is the challenge. That is the challenge. So, what is the way forward? We are basically saying to the government, please withdraw CAB3. Please withdraw CAB3. Referendum tinozotaura, just withdraw it. For the second piece of Zimbabwe, withdraw CAB3. Because now you've divided the nation, left, right, and center. You've divided the nation. People are angry. People are unhappy. There's violence. There's clampdown. People have been evicted from Zimbabwe. Please withdraw CAB3. If you are not going to withdraw it, then please respect the provisions of our constitution, which demand 2 referendums. But if we are going to have those 2 referendums, there must be conducive conditions and a conducive environment for conducting the referendum. We in the CDF, we have given application notifications of our public meeting, more than 200. We have not been allowed to have a public meeting. We've actually even been arrested for having a private meeting in Mtara to discuss the constitution. When Professor Maduku have been beaten up, young students are in jail right now as I'm talking to you. So you can't open a debate. But you don't allow people to debate about it. We had those public consultations of Parliament on the 30th and 31st of March. They were a farce. They were a farce in Bulawayo Lati City War. Zambiakas no Zad Zamachia. By the time our people came, they couldn't sit. Then they were not being picked up by the chairperson, a microphone. The few who spoke were beaten up and followed up, particularly those who spoke in Ngeta. In Chitungwiza, only 15 people spoke. 4 people tried to say we are against it. They were chucked out of the room. You also, what happened at the City Sports Center, in front of the international media, in front of the BBC, in front of the Herald, in front of Reuters. They couldn't give us the microphone, we who were in Bay 8. And then thugs surrounded us. So we had to be rescued by security. But alas, poor David, that Coulthard could not. They beat him up. They stole his phone. We know who stole his phone. He's a member of the Central Committee of ZANU-PF, but he's not been arrested to date. So I ask, if ZANU-PF are liberators, did you liberate people so that you tie them and enslave them to autocracy as you are doing? Surely not. Eben Rushe Chitepo is standing in his grave. Look out, Masuku is standing in his grave. Joshua Mpabu Kongomo is standing in his grave. Dabaning Stone, may he so rest in peace, is standing in his grave. That's not the Zimbabwe that our liberators fought for. That's not the Zimbabwe that Edson Stole died for. That's not the Zimbabwe that over 50,000 people died during the War of Liberation. So I want to conclude by saying they can kill us, they can arrest us, they can detain us, but we cannot allow the mutilation of our constitution. We cannot allow the coup against the people of Zimbabwe through constitutional amendment, Bill number 3 of 2026. If they pass this bill, we have no country at all. Because this country is now subject to whatever they want it to be, because of the use of the word notwithstanding, which is in clause 4.2a. They can say notwithstanding in the election in 2033, we can have it in 2060. So where you have a moving baseline, it's no longer a country. You can't play tennis with a continuously changing baseline. Kana wakudzorera kaneti kana takadiki. Kana wakuda kuseva zineti rinokura. That is what is happening. Nyika isiye fecha fecha. Nyika isiye munhu. Hapana nematitle deeds emunhu. And we cannot allow our country to be arrested by syndicates and cartels. We are all equal in terms of the constitution. One of the most important provisions of our constitution is section 56. And we're not asking for much. This is not a political platform. We have not said we want Mnangagwa or we don't want Mnangagwa. That's not our remit. Our remit is that we want to protect the constitution. We want equality, we want fair standards, we want inclusivity, we want prosperity and fairness and accountability, which is spelled out in section 8 of our constitution. That's all we want. That blessed who is here just wants to go back home and look after his family, complete his degree, and carry out his job as a journalist. All of you who are here crave for a free, democratic Zimbabwe that will give you jobs, that will look after your children, that will allow you to rest and go on holiday, Nyanga, Victoria Falls, or Brighton, or France. That's all we want. We're not asking for much. We're not asking for much. But we have a government that has no empathy for its people. We have a government that has no love for its people. We have a government that sees the citizen as an enemy. We have a government that is a factory somewhere to manufacture pain and suffering for its citizens. That is not a government suited for purpose. And that's why we need a strong constitution. Because a strong constitution allows us to hold to account that government. A strong constitution ensures standards in free and fair elections, strong institutions that Dara was talking about. And that's what we're asking. And it's not too much to ask. You live in these modern societies. I was in London, I think the day before yesterday. And the motorcade, passed where I was. I think it was. I was with Edgar Mafose. I think it was the Prime Minister. They were just 4 cars. In Zimbabwe, there would have been 100 cars. 4 people. And the 100 motorcades. What crime have we committed? We just want to live a simple life, but with opportunities. If I've got my son who wants to be a doctor, he must have that opportunity. If I've got my daughter who wants to be a rocket scientist, he must have that opportunity. Now in Zimbabwe, the only job that is there is the only job that is there is tomato. 9-year-old girl children are prostituting themselves in places like Epworth. 15-year-old children are dropping out of school. In some places, particularly the Midlands, as high as 40% of school-going children are dropping out because of poverty. We want a better Zimbabwe. But a better Zimbabwe starts with a constitution. A better Zimbabwe starts with a solid constitution that protects its citizens. A better Zimbabwe starts with a leadership that loves its people, that fears its people. It's not good enough just to love the people. You must also fear them. Because if you fear them, then you respect that they are my bosses, these people. They can account for me in the next election. And that way, you will make policy decisions in their favor. If you are going to allow $4 billion to be stolen out of the public coffers, it means that you don't love people, but also you don't fear them. So part of the thing that we are also lacking as Zimbabweans is that we don't have the agency, the capacity to act for ourselves, to defend ourselves. That's why my call at the beginning, which I'll end up with, is that you in the diaspora must accept your rights. You are paying for that economy. US $3 billion remittances is not a joke. So if you are paying, you must also have representation. You must also have a bigger say in that country. In the Zimbabwean diaspora, I spoke about the diaspora boom. You are very much unlike most diasporans in the world. I've studied in India. The average diasporan in places like that doesn't have an intention of going back to settle. All of you I know, you want to go back home. Mortgage, homelingi, mazano maabwaka kumaruzeva, masaba, techikuona ipama YouTube. That's what you are doing because you love your country. Yeah, you love your country. It's your home. Very few of you think I want to be buried here. So if you love your country must give you a voice because you are giving that country something in return, your ideas and your contributions. I thank you very much in the way for your questions.